Joe Rogan and Tulsi Gabbard call out the hypocrisy of the left. DHS Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas was alerted that migrants were not, in fact, whipped by Border Patrol agents. Democratic candidate John Fetterman is forced to read from a green screen due to his health concerns. And Alex Jones is forced to pay $1 billion to Sandy Hook victims. All of that and more here on The Bald Brad Show. Welcome to The Bald Brad Show. It is Thursday, October 13th, and as always, I couldn't be happier than to kick this morning off right, doing The Bald Brad Show and hanging out with all of you, my friends and true American patriots, where we come together as a community of conservatives and Republicans, go over the stories of the day, and bring all the news and information you need to know about. So if you want to join us here at The Bald Brad Show, and you haven't, what are you doing? Hit that subscribe button. If you're over at Rumble, hit the plus and give us a comment down below. And if you're listening on any of the podcast airwaves, Apple, Google, Spotify, heck folks, you can find us and listen to us anywhere and everywhere. Leave us a lovely 5-star review. Not only would you be helping a conservative, but most importantly, you'd be supporting getting conservative thought and ideas out there to new viewers who haven't seen our content or our channel. So your help and support would be greatly appreciated. Make sure you hit that like button. Leave us a comment down below on how you think Joe Biden is doing in his presidency. And double check to make sure that bell notification icon's clicked so you're notified whenever we upload a video, which is every Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, with Supernatural Saturdays and a sprinkling of politics on Sunday. Be notified by hitting that bell notification icon. With that being said, we're jumping right into our lead story of the day with Joe Rogan and Tulsi Gabbard blasting wokeism, leftist hypocrisy, and Joe Rogan here shares an insane story about a woke school and a litter box. We got a clip on this one, folks. It just shows you how insane the left has gone and how, honestly, their ideology will destroy this country eventually if we let it get too far. So podcast superstar Joe Rogan shared an insane story about identity ideology run amok in a school that purportedly accommodated a girl student who identifies as a cat, meow, that type of cat, by placing a litter box in the restroom. I am not kidding. This story is so insane that you would probably go, there's no way that this would happen. I'm telling you as a teacher, somebody that's been in both public and private school system for at least the last 5 years, I can believe this taking place. This is not out of the realm of being not plausible. I fully believe it. So he has on Tulsi Gabbard, and the story that he's sharing and claiming is that there's kids who identify as furries. It's the first time I'm hearing the word furries, but I know there's human beings that identify as dogs, cats, wolves. I mean, we've seen it all. The wolf one was from Matt Walsh's film, What is a Woman?, where literally you had a human being identifying as a wolf. We've seen those clips of people dressing up as animals and eating dog food and living in cages. So it's not, again, out of the realm of a child identifying that way, but you got to hear this story. I want to go ahead and play it for you from Joe Rogan's mouth himself. Let's go ahead and roll it.
Ready for this? My friend, his wife, is a school teacher, and she works at a school that had to install a litter box in the girls' room because there is a girl who's a furry who identifies as an animal, and her mother badgered the school until they agreed to put a litter box in one of the stalls. Yeah. So this girl goes into the litter room, or to the girls' room, and...
Did he just say litter room? The litter room. Sorry, let's continue.
Urinates or whatever. I don't know if she poops in it. That's pretty gross. You know what I mean? Like, if you could teach your cat, by the way, here's the thing. If you could teach your cat to use the toilet, you would. Mm-hmm. Okay?
Yeah.
Like, you don't want a box of in your house. It's the worst. I've had cats my whole life. It's the worst thing about having cats. You got to clean that box of every day.
Yeah.
Like, it's the greatest thing about dogs. They go outside. Like, you're a fucking human.
The cat's got their humans trained.
Imagine how crazy that is. You're a fucking human being, and you prefer a litter box. You want to into a pile of sand rather than use a bathroom that you could flush the toilet, wipe yourself like a normal person. Like, you're so crazy with what you think an animal is that not only have you said this, but you've conned the school into putting this litter box in a girl's room.
Yeah.
Which is bananas.
It is.
It is bananas. And it is crazy. But the left are crazy. And then what's happening here is there used to be a separation between the Democratic Party and the progressive left. They used to be different. And what's happening is the Democratic Party is slowly absorbing the progressive left to where they're all for this stuff. I've seen something very similar in the school system. And what I'm curious on is if that person identifies as a cat, what type of accommodations is the teachers themselves and the administration having to do outside of the kitty litter box? I mean, who's having to clean that up? Is a custodian having to clean it up? Does he clean it up with a shovel or with a rake? I mean, who's the poor guy that has to clean this thing? So he gave his story, talked about how she goes to the bathroom or he goes to the bathroom. Who knows? You don't want to misidentify anybody anymore because hell, you'd be censored. But the story Rogan shared is similar to other rumors about other schools placing litter boxes into bathrooms, and those have gone viral on the internet, but they have not necessarily been substantiated, meaning not like kind of super thrown out there for national news and actual videotape of this stuff and being legitimate. But I've heard cases as well as something very, very similar with this stuff, and it would not shock me if it was legit. You also have school officials in Wisconsin and also New York, among other districts nationwide, that have faced similar claims and have vigorously denied them and characterized the rumors as a hoax or urban myth. 20 years ago, you would have been like, yeah, no way, man. That's so crazy. There's no way that's going on. Nowadays, especially as a teacher in the school system, I'm going like, yeah, would it surprise me? Like, at that point, it's not even being gullible. It's just going, yeah, that's not even satire or a joke. I could actually see that taking place. You have Republicans running this year in midterm elections, such as gubernatorial candidate Scott Jensen of Minnesota and others, speaking of Colorado, and they had advanced claims as part of a broader pushback against transgender ideology in schools. Because what you've had is boys claiming, or should I say claiming, believing that they're actually females, which they're not. They're not biological females, they're biological men, being given locker room access, in some cases have actually gone and raped little girls because of that access. And again, the left are all for it. The left are all for this transgender stuff. They want Planned Parenthood on high school campuses that will help transition your child without your acknowledgement and you knowing about it. There's already certain things that are taking place on school campuses that are not to your knowledge of what's going on with your son or daughter on those campuses, whether the school psychologist knows. The teaching staff might not even know what's going on, so you can't blame them because it's only under the admin or whoever's in control of that child to help them transition, give them puberty blockers, hormone enhancers, and guide them right along. And you got the progressive left that want to advance this stuff. There was just a story the other day where the progressive left literally says a baby knows its own gender before it's ever born. It knows its own sex. Explain that one to me. The same party that says it's not a living human being in the womb, that you can abort it, is now saying that that same living being that they don't believe is a living human being can know its sex before it's ever born. Explain that one to me, folks. Explain it. Rogan also discussed on this podcast with Tulsi Gabbard wokeism, and that was announced this week. Furthermore, because of this wokeism and the hypocrisy of the left, Tulsi Gabbard announced, which you've all saw, it made national headlines, that she left the Democratic Party in a blistering statement. She said that the hypocrisy of the far left progressives pushed her away from the Democrats. We see this time and time again. The most famous one was Ronald Reagan, where he said, I didn't leave the Democrat Party left me. Shows you they've been moving far left for decades. She also was recalling how she was attacked for not showing up at a women's march after Donald Trump was elected. Quote, the irony is, here we are, sitting now with a lot of these same people who are like, oh, I don't know how to define a woman, and there's no such thing as a woman, Gabbard told Rogan. Quote, all of these examples point to the hypocrisy, the fact that they don't believe in the truth, and that whatever their cause of the moment is, whatever they decide is the truth, and that thing must be measured against you, like you and I are either with us or you're against us, and if you're with us, you got to prove that you're zealous for the cause. I mean, you got to go out there, you got to do everything you can. Rogan agreed and credited Daily Wire with Matt Walsh's documentary, with exposing the ridiculous of woke gender ideology with a documentary that leaked What is a Woman? Quote, I mean, with wokeness, you can identify as a woman. You can get used to the woman's restroom and be able to utilize it. Like, okay, what is it? What's a woman? You know, can a man get pregnant? According to the left, they can. Okay, well, what is it? Can a biological male get pregnant? And then people panic and they start. The people that identify as a woman are capable of being pregnant, and people that identify as a male are capable of also being pregnant. Like, what are you saying? Meaning, what he's calling out here is just, it's so crazy. It's so baffling. You can't wrap your head around it. And so what does it do? It creates chaos. And that chaos is going to ultimately lead to the destruction of this country. Chaos tends to lead to destruction. And that's what their goal is. Indoctrinate the youth in the public school system and sometimes the private school system. They're going to grow up being all indoctrinated, confused, becoming doctors, lawyers, and all this other stuff. And then you have a mega republic, a democracy implode within itself. So I doubt it's going to be a foreign adversary like Russia or China that's going to go up against us and defeat us. It's going to be ourselves that consume ourselves from the inside out, and no longer we can have a republic or a democracy. Moving into our next story of the day here to keep things going. Y'all remember how there was this big hubbub, I think it was a year ago, or maybe a little over a year ago, where there was these photos taken of these Border Patrol agents on horses, and the left lost their mind in the Democrat Party and said that they were whipping these migrants. And it turns out that they weren't whips, they were just the reins of the horses, which came out, I don't know, like an hour later, where people that rode horses, people that are familiar with horses, people that have seen the stuff, go, yeah, those are just reins, they're not actually whipping anybody. So you had President Joe Biden, condone it. You had Jen Psaki doing the same thing, Karine Jean-Pierre, all the White House admins and people that follow Joe Biden, the Democrat Party, all sat there and condoned these Border Patrol agents, investigations galore. All this stuff happened. Then it came out that there wasn't going to be any punishment to these Border Patrol agents because they didn't do the very said thing that the mainstream media, the White House, and all the Democratic people were saying they did, of which they're, again, claiming that they whipped these illegal immigrants. Well, check this one out, folks. And by the way, nobody's apologized for this. Fox News reported and published an email on Wednesday that said was delivered to Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas, alerting him prior to a major press conference that Border Patrol agents had never whipped migrants. Do you think that he came out on the airwaves and said that, or do you think he went with the narrative? Do you think he lied and went with the narrative that they did whip these migrants? Which one do you think? We all know, because history told us, he went with the latter. The email, which also was shared on Twitter, showed that Mayorkas had been provided with a statement from photographers who took the photos others used to claim that the Border Patrol agents had been whipping migrants prior to the press conference, at which he referred to the imagery as horrifying. So he's notified. The dude still goes out there and says it's horrifying. The dude still goes out there and pushes this narrative, which just goes to show you can't trust anything from these politicians and also the Biden administration. Here it is. This is what was posted by Fox LA. Quote, new email reveals DHS Secretary Mayorkas was alerted by DHS top public affairs official that the whipping narrative behind the horseback Border Patrol photos wasn't true. But at the White House press conference 2.5 hours later, he didn't refute the narrative, instead calling the images horrifying. Just lovely, right? Just lovely. But this is the guy that went on Brett Byers' show, Fox News, like, oh, well, we got the drug cartels. We got everything under control. And the conversation was kind of centered not just around the drug cartels, but it was centered around terrorists that came through the border and were apprehended. And everybody's like, well, what'd you do with them? Where are they? And he wouldn't give a clear answer. And he was also followed up by Jim Jordan during a Senate Judiciary Committee, I believe, or the House Judiciary Committee, and he couldn't answer the question either. No clue where these guys were at, didn't have any information on them, which just makes us wonder, the BS stuff that he's saying here, the narrative he's pushing here, and then I'm supposed to believe him when he talks about that we know where the terrorists are, we know where they're going, there's no sleeper cells in America. It's just this. It's open borders, folks, and I know you all know this. It's open borders. You got MS-13 gang members coming through. You got drug cartel coming through, massive amounts of fentanyl coming through, violent gang members, smuggling, sex trafficking, terrorists coming through. I mean, you got a litany of people. You got over 800,000 gotaways. It's up to 1 million now since Joe Biden's got in office alone that have come through the border. You're telling me you don't even think one person of those was a terrorist? You don't think out of the million people that came through, you don't think there was one violent person that came through there that has a potential of creating mass problems here in America? It's amazing. But they don't see it. Democrats don't see it. The email quoted as saying that he had never seen Border Patrol agents whip anyone. This comes from I believe, the photographer that sent this. Quote, some of the Haitian men started running, trying to go around the horses. I've never seen them whip anyone. He was swinging it, but it can be misconstrued when you're looking at the picture. You had the Fox News reporter went on the note that the email, which went to Mayorkas and several other DHS Public Affairs Assistant Secretary Marcia Espinoza, was sent before the press conference, but Mayorkas adopted the same tone that had already been taken by President Joe Biden. Of course he would. Why wouldn't he? They're trying to push a narrative because if you recall, this was kind of early on in Joe Biden's presidency, if I remember correctly, and they want open borders, right? It was just a challenge. It wasn't a crisis. No problems here. And if they can make the Border Patrol agents seem like the bad guys, then they have somebody to pin the blame on everything that's going on. It's horrific. It's terrible. Look what they're doing to these people. They're mistreating them and all these things. And now what are they pinning the blame on? Putin on other things. Oh, it's Trump's fault. It's always everybody else's fault with this administration. They play the blame game, and that's what they're going to do. That is literally what they are going to do for the rest of his presidency. We're 2 years in, you guys, and they're still saying that it's Trump's fault. They're still saying it's Putin's fault here. They're still saying the economy, of which we're in a recession, and literally Joe Biden the other day said that we're about to hit a tiny recession, even though we are already in one, that literally it's everybody else's fault, that we're in a, quote, transition phase. They've been using this language of transition phase, that the economy's in a transition phase, literally since the beginning of his presidency. So we're just going to keep transitioning for all 4 years. At no point are we ever going to actually transition. We're just going to be in a transition phase all 4 years. And that's how they're going to get around this and swindle all of you. It goes on here to say, quote, it was sent hours after Biden falsely accused the agents of strapping migrants and promised they would pay, and hours before Mayorkas' presser actually took place. So you got Joe Biden taking the podium, saying all his stuff, never apologized still for this. Never apologized. Years later, still doesn't apologize. You have Jen Psaki never apologizing. Karine Jean-Pierre never apologizing. Alejandro Mayorkas, who knew about it, was sent the email, still doesn't apologize because it's everybody else's fault. The email from the Fox News reporter said was initially obtained by the Heritage Foundation pursuant of a FOIA request. They filed a Freedom of Information Act request with DHS in March seeking communications about the whipping incident. DHS didn't produce the documents, so Heritage sued them in June of last week. DHS turned over an initial batch of emails, which it was revealed. You got to love this stuff. It's unbelievable. And you know what? Let's just go ahead here. I have it for you. I wasn't going to play it, but let's just go ahead and hear it from the horse's mouth. After already receiving this email, let's see what he had to say here.
First of all, the images, as I expressed earlier, the images horrified us in terms of what they suggest and what they conjure up in terms of not only our nation's history, but unfortunately the fact that that page of history has not been turned entirely. And that means that there is much work to do, and we are very focused on doing it. But I will not prejudge the facts. I do not in any way want to impair the integrity of the investigative process. We have investigators who are looking at it independently. They will draw their conclusions according to their standard operating procedures, and then the results of that investigation will be determined by the facts that are adduced.
Amazing. The facts that are deduced, even though he had the facts right there in front of him. And by the way, if you're curious, this specifically was from September 24th, 2021. So over a year ago, still hasn't apologized. But he's going to take the podium and push that narrative. Why? Because the president was pushing the narrative too. It's all about narrative. It's all about stories. It's all about spinning. Moving into our next story of the day. Like I said, today's jam-packed, folks, full of stories. We have U.S. Senate candidate John Fetterman. That's the guy with like the lump on his neck that had a stroke, that's bald. He's running for Pennsylvania. Well, he conducted an in-person interview that aired this week with the help of a giant computer screen that translated what the interview was saying to him. If you want to see the shape of the Democrat Party, of course you could look at Nancy Pelosi as her teeth are falling out of her head. Of course you can look at Joe Biden fighting with the teleprompter, looking for the Oval Office. not knowing his staff's name, not recognizing his wife, shaking his hand in the air to ghosts, looking literally for dead people in the crowd. Sure, that could be the face of the Democrat Party, but this is another thing because it shows you where the Democrats are at and who they're willing to vote for. Their interview was taped on Friday, comes as polls have shown the race between Fetterman and Republican challenger Dr. Oz, yeah, the guy from TV, tightened in recent weeks over issues ranging from Fetterman's health to his soft stances on crime to questions about his authenticity, as critics say that the blue-collar image that he portrays is phony. Fetterman also has not yet debated Oz despite significant pressure to do so, even from the political left, as early voting in the state has already begun. You saw the same thing with Joe Biden. They kept him in the basement for months and months and months. Didn't want to debate, couldn't go out there, couldn't pull anybody out to his events, and somehow got 80 million votes. And now you have the same thing taking place. This guy's going along, virtually hiding in his basement, reading from a screen, can't process information because, fortunately, he's very, very ill, but he's still deciding to run, and he still has a massive following here from Democrats. So the interviewer, MSNBC News, Dasha Burns, wrote in a report that Fetterman struggled to speak and had trouble finding words. We have a clip here, you guys, of this, of her talking about it. And even she's like baffled about this whole thing. She's trying to comprehend it. And you could see her through this video here, kind of walking on eggshells on what she says. So I know Fetterman's going to look familiar to all of you. Again, he has health concerns. I'm not trying to rip him for his health concerns, but what I am ripping him is if he's having trouble comprehending things and computing and processing information, probably not the best fit to be running for office. Let's go ahead and roll it.
We had a monitor set up so that he could read my questions because he still has lingering auditory processing issues as a result of the stroke, which means he has a hard time understanding what he's hearing. Now, once he reads the question, he's able to understand. You'll hear he also still has some problems, some challenges with speech. And I'll say, Katie, that just in some of the small talk prior to the interview, before the closed captioning was up and running, it did seem that he had a hard time understanding our conversation. Saw and heard there the auditory processing challenges, the speech challenges. I've spoken with stroke experts. They say folks can fully recover from that. But the caveat that every expert gives is that they can't fully assess a patient without details on their health records, without that information that the campaign has yet to disclose. We've asked multiple times for medical records. We've asked for interviews with someone from his medical team. Those requests have so far been denied to NBC News and other outlets that have requested this.
It's going to continue to get denied. And I mean, look, we've been asking for Joe Biden to take a cognitive test for well over 2 years now, and they're just not going to do it. I mean, everybody knows that Joe Biden is a non-sentient human being. Everybody knows John Fetterman is unfortunately going through a massive health problem. And the wise thing would be to drop out and take care of your health because you're struggling processing information. You can't even listen and process information. You have to read it. And so you're not willing to do anything. But the point that I want to make here on the show is it shows you that the Democrat Party has no bench. This is all they got is Nancy Pelosi and the squad and others, Joe Biden. I mean, these are the people they're chauffeuring out. They're literally trying to get Hillary back in the mix again. We all see now she keeps popping up. They don't have anybody. And the people they do have massive health concerns that can't even read or listen to questions half the time. Joe Biden can't read the question. Joe Biden can't read his teleprompter. Nancy Pelosi, the same thing. It's a common theme with these Democrats. Burns responded to left of center reporters who criticized the interview by saying Wednesday morning on NBC's Today that according to Fetterman's campaign, quote, our team has the first to be in the room with Fetterman for an interview rather than via remote video conference. Online critics and pundits made note of how serious Fetterman's condition is and how the media has already rapidly changed the narrative around him. And not only just changed the narrative around him, you could see her actively walking on eggshells rather than just being blunt of like, the guy wasn't there. He's struggling. For the love of God, don't vote for this guy. No, not saying anything like that. Of course she wouldn't, obviously, right? She's a reporter, probably wants to keep her job. Only I would say something like that on there. Quote, Look at Fetterman glancing over at his computer to read the reporter's questions. He can't process audibly and then get the answers. CEO of the Senate Leadership Fund. The guy's in bad shape. Now, we're not trying to hound him. I'm not trying to belittle him in terms of because he's going through this. It's just Democrats are willing to support somebody that's just cognitively struggling, and it's a common theme. Again, Nancy Pelosi, Joe Biden, you have Fetterman. I mean, you keep going down and giving a list of names of who they're willing to vote for that's having struggles with their health, and they're willing to put these people in office. Quote, he's not disabled. He has an ailment. It's impaired his cognitive abilities. If the guy was in a coma, Dems would still come up with some BS reason to vote for him. Because just like Republicans, they care a lot more about winning than the competency of the candidates, he continued. In many ways, Fetterman's stroke has actually helped divert attention from his incompetence and his fringe positions. He basically has been hiding for months. This is exactly what I said. This comes from the editor of The Federalist. This is exactly what I've been saying this entire time. Throw him in a basement, hide him around, have the focus on his mental issues rather than the things that come out of his mouth and actually the things that he believes in, which is why he hasn't been debating. How can you debate somebody if you can't audibly understand what they're saying as you're actively debating them? What, are we going to sit there and all just look on a teleprompter and wait and just like this for hours on end for you to read everything that everybody's saying so you can actually process it and do it? It's just, like I said, I know I'm repeating myself. It's just amazing to me how Democrats are willing to vote, and they have no issues with it. No issues at all. Like, oh, what's the problem? There's nothing to see here. Unbelievable. Speaking of unbelievable news, and I kind of want to tread lightly with this story because I'm talking sort of out of ignorance here because I don't follow the Alex Jones case too much. And this is our last story of the day. The amount that this man has to pay, it is quite shocking here. So for those that are unfamiliar, as was I don't follow Alex Jones. I don't watch his show. The only things I see of him really honestly is on Joe Rogan's podcast because I kind of like the conspiracy theory stuff and what he has to say. And so, with Joe Rogan, aliens, ghosts, and government conspiracy, stuff like that, I like. Supposedly, Alex Jones spread lies about the Sandy Hook massacre. I didn't watch the trial, all that stuff. I wasn't following it. So just with that a basis, just know, kind of take my opinion here as a grain of salt. I more or less just want to tell you what happened. A Connecticut jury ordered Alex Jones to pay nearly $1 billion to families. Yes, you heard that correctly. Not 1 million with an M. $1 billion to families of victims of the 2012 Sandy Hook elementary school shooting for spreading lies about the massacre. Now, I think he should be fined. I'm not disregarding that. Whether you like Alex Jones or not, $1 billion seems kind of insane to me. I'm not saying they shouldn't get compensation. How much compensation? I'm not too sure because there's 6 adults and 20 children were killed during the shooting. So if you're to spread that amongst them, I don't know how exactly you quantify this and in terms of what was the calculation to come to these numbers. So as I said, 6 adults and 20 children were killed during the shooting in 2012 in Newtown, Connecticut, just 20 miles away from where the victims' families gave tearful testimony in Waterbury Superior Court during the trial. Jones repeatedly told millions of listeners on his InfoWars show that the shooting was a hoax and that the victims were crisis actors hired as part of a scheme to impose gun control laws. So obviously not a good thing to do, a harmful thing to do, a very wrong thing to do. I, honest to God, don't know why you would think, just if I'm sitting back as like a third party here, why you would think somebody would fake something like that. I mean, I know we're talking about the left and, saying that they're furries and that they think that they're animals and they're kittens and they're putting kitty litter boxes in school systems. This is way beyond that. This is something that's just kind of odd for me. But again, Alex Jones is known to say kind of asinine things every now and then. He's on the air all day, and I'm not giving him cop out. I'm not saying giving him an excuse or a way out of this. I'm just saying that he's known to talk about conspiracy theories and kind of say crazy things. The parents and siblings of the victims testified that they were subjected to relentless harassment and abuse from people who believe in Jones's lie. Supposedly, people were showing up like guns in front of these people's houses. Robbie Parker, and plaintiff, whose 6-year-old daughter was killed in the shooting, which is just terrible to think about, was awarded $120 million He said at the trial that a decade of harassment forced his family to leave Connecticut for Washington State. My whole question again of this is just how do we get to that 120? Like, why is it not 60 million? Why is it not 400 million? It's a lot of money. And it's terrible again to hear this whole story is just terrible. I'm more concerned about the $120 million is a lot of money. I'm just not too sure how these juries, plaintiffs, defendants, everybody in the whole mix came up with these numbers. Because $1 billion, folks, seems to me like you're just trying to crush this guy and get him off the airwaves, which they've come out and said. The left has literally come out and said, we just want to cancel you. We want you to stop. We don't want you to ever have your show again. This seems like that kind of move. Quote, it would have come in these waves, Parker testified last month. It was almost like I knew when Alex Jones said something because we would get a huge wave of stuff, which is terrible. It's just terrible. Matthew Soto, the brother of slain teacher Vicky Soto, testified that he was approached at his own high school by someone questioning whether his sister had really died. That's rough. Jones admitted at trial that the shooting happened but remained combative, referring to the ordeal as a kangaroo court and calling the judge a tyrant. Quote, is this a struggle session, Jones said at one point last month. Are we in China? I've already said I'm sorry hundreds of times, and I'm done saying I'm sorry. I get that aspect. If you keep saying you're sorry, it would get frustrating, but it's just a terrible thing that what these families had to go through, not just from the incident alone, but the Alex Jones pushing this whole kind of idea and then being harassed because of that. It's the second massive judgment against Jones. In August, if you recall, a Texas jury awarded $49.3 million to Neil Heslin and Scarlett Lewis, whose 6-year-old son was killed in the shooting. InfoWars parent company, Free Speech Systems, filed for bankruptcy shortly before Jones's trial began. Well, and now, honest to God, I don't know how this works. Maybe there's some lawyers that can sit there and chime in the comments below. But what do? Seize all his assets? Literally start selling the camera equipment, the studios, the facilities that Alex Jones has run. Because you're close to $1 billion. I don't know if I've heard or seen of a settlement like this before with these kind of penalties being distributed from a single person. Maybe it's happened, but I want to know what you all think about this. Let's create a comment down in the section below, because I do think there should be compensation. I'm struggling, and this is what I don't like. I like to be very specific in terms of not $1 billion, but I get like 200 million. I actually don't know a number here because I just don't know enough about the case, but I also don't know how punitive damage is. I know there's attorney fees that are thrown into this and all that stuff. It just $1 billion just seems, honestly, it seems crazy to me. I think they should be compensated for the things they've had to deal with. But I want to know how much do you think they should have been compensated? Because compensation has to be there. For what he did, it has to be there. $1 billion though, or is some of you might be like, $1 billion is not enough. They should have gotten $2 billion or something. Let's create a conversation down below, because I need your feedback on this. Some of you have been watching this closer than I have and is going to know a lot more. But I just don't think, I think $1 billion is kind of, I think that's too much. They should be compensated. It's a horrific thing that took place, not just for these parents, obviously for the children that went through what they went through, even those that survived. For Alex Jones to do what he did was wrong. He admits it's wrong. He apologized that it's wrong. I think $1 billion is a little bit too much, but let me know what you think about all this in the comments below. Thank you so much. We try to give you a jam-packed show, adding in an extra story today, folks. We had 4 stories rather than 3. We're trying to expand a little bit, give you some good content here on the Bald Brad channel. Please support us again by hitting that like button, leaving us a comment down below. And folks, check us out on our podcast. You can find us on Google, Spotify, anywhere and everywhere. Please listen to that. We're trying to grow our platform here. Thank you so much for all the love and support you show us, and I'll see you tomorrow here on the Bald Brad Show.